Hello everybody, Shinjo here, welcome back to the channel, and in today's episode of Let's Talk Anime, we are finally back for what's probably the first time this year, heck probably the first time in a good 7 months at this point, but I finally got around to watching stuff that is recommended by you guys, and there's a little bit of an update. I'll get to that a bit later. But either way, we are going to start off with Digimon Beatbreak. So this was recommended to me. If I'm not mistaken, it was recommended as soon as the show started. And I watched 2 or 3 episodes of it. I can't remember exactly what it was. But there was one scene that one character, kind of the same idea, that made me stop watching the show. And I'll get into that with the negatives. But the things that I like about it is, first of all, it's a much more mature Digimon story. It honestly kind of reminds me of the comparisons from the first 2 to Tamers, where Tamers is a lot more serious and darker, and it's a lot more well received from what I've seen around. Plus, and I don't know this for a fact, it feels like the characters in here are a bit older than in other Digimon. I mean, it certainly is a lot more prevalent compared to something like Digimon Ghost Game, because Ghost Game, they look like they're 10 years old. Again, I don't actually know the ages of any of these characters offhand. I didn't look. I'm pretty sure they're 14 or 15 in this, which is crazy to think because the designs remind me of something from Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds. And that's a nice transition into my next positive. I love Reina's design. It's really cool, and it may be just because it reminds me of the same vibe that Roman does in Yu-Gi-Oh! 7s, but I just like her design. It's really cool, and while the big puffy coat seems a bit odd and a bit goofy, I don't necessarily mind it. I really like her design, and the fact that she's not just fawning over the protagonist like a lovesick puppy all the time is a real plus. And on that note, while there are some moments that I don't really like him, Tomoro overall is a really cool character. You can kind of see why he acts the way he does in situations because of the way he was brought up and everything. And since I'm talking about everybody from the Glowing Dawn, I might as well talk about Makoto and Shirapmon. It's been maybe a few weeks ago now with the whole storyline. I say storyline, it's really only been 2 episodes. That focuses on Shirapmon's bond with Makoto that causes it to digivolve. That's really cool, and I really enjoyed that episode. Because most of the time with something like that, you get it from the Ties, the Davis, the main characters of the show. So I feel like getting something like this with what's essentially a side character, I know that's kind of paraphrasing it, but essentially not as important as the main character, is really cool. Plus, the mystery of what exactly is going on is really neat. There's so many things at play. There's this other team that's screwing them over. There's the Elite 5 Stars, which that really plays in well to Kyo, because I really didn't think much of him. I just felt him similar to a Freed in Pokemon Horizons, where he's the overseer and the one that's always there to lend a helping hand, but the fact that he puts all of this burden on himself and suffers from it is honestly really real, and the tie-in to the Elite 5 Stars is really neat. I will say, and I probably should have said this at the top, I've only watched up to episode 14, I believe it is. From what I see, the next episode may be sort of filler-ish. I know that Vegemon is in there, which I guess I could talk about that as well. I didn't put that in my pros, but I like how there are so many references to older Digimon. Because in the case of something like Apply Monsters, or even from what I've seen from Ghost Game, there's not really much reference to outside Digimon. Although in App Monsters it makes sense because they're appliances instead of actual Digimon. Although I think it's actually applications instead of appliances. Well, whatever. There's that one random episode that Agumon's in. But there are just so many episodes where they're just Digimon from back in the day, like the big sludge dude, I can't think of what his name is, and then Mushroomon. I just get a big grin on my face whenever I see those guys. Not that I absolutely love them, because there's the poop dude, but overall, they're fine. Now on to my cons, which I guess is technically just one con, because it's the problem that I had for the first 5 episodes, maybe even up to 10, Gekomon. And I would say that Gekomon certainly has grown on me, but I just don't understand how, first of all, he talks and every sentence he ends with is, you know? Now I get it, that's like a verbal tick in Japan, it makes a lot of sense. That's like how Meowth ends his sentences as well. But he is a bit much, and he borders on the line of being stupid. And honestly, that was the breaking point for me at first. Digimon Beatbreak breaking point. But the episode where they were just walking to a job, I can't remember what it was, but then Gekomon just goes off on his own, and I'm just here like, come on Gekomon, focus and pay attention, and that was when I stopped watching it. And I'm glad that I did continue, because the big moment when Gekomon turns super berserk evil was really cool. Especially seeing how Tomura and Gekomon parallel each other about how they're both difficult to deal with and all that stuff they talked about in the show. I'm really glad I continued. Now at the same time, I wouldn't say it's perfect. Gekomon does still get a bit much sometimes, but I suppose in any anime for the most part, especially aimed at kids, you have to have that sort of stupid character, for lack of a better way to explain it, because kids just laugh at comedy. But overall, I'm really enjoying it, and I'm really curious to see what happens next. But on to my next topic, honey lemon soda. So, first of all, I can't remember when it aired. I know it was sometime in 2024, if I remember correctly. No, shoot, it was actually probably 2025. I thought this year was 2025. Ignore me. But I believe that I watched it at first, when it first aired. I may have watched 1 episode, maybe 2, and I just stopped watching it, which, like Digimon Beatbreak, I'll get into later. But as for the positives, I really like the art style. It looks really cool. And I don't know, is lemon soda something that's actually big in Japan? I'm not sure myself. I would imagine it is, because Japan's got weird flavors and stuff like Kit Kats, so I wouldn't really be surprised. But just the way that it looks, especially the openings and endings, both in visual and audio, it really is cool. And Ishimori's character is honestly really interesting as well. Although I have seen this concept similarly done in other shows, like, I can't think of what the show is, Hinako Note, where the punchline is the main character is just turns stiff as a board and turns into a scarecrow when people start talking to her. But this, I feel, makes a little more sense, because Ishimori, and if I'm not mistaken, Ishi translates to stone or rock or something similar, so calling her stone makes a lot of sense. And it's honestly really clever. But overall, I'm really interested in Ishimori's character, because it just feels like she presents herself as being backwards, but once people start talking to her, she gets more comfortable and breaks out of her shell, so to speak. I don't know, I may be looking too far into it, but it's just really interesting. And the other thing that I like is Endo's character. I feel like there's something going on with me that I'm really liking the supporting characters in these shows. I like Reina in Digimon Beatbreak. I like Endo in this. She's just a super positive, bubbly, fresh air. I know that's English, trust me. But I really like her character, and it reminds me of Yuki from Horimiya, which is really interesting because both of them have yellowish hair. They're both supporting characters, and they both have a crush on somebody that I'm assuming that the person that Endo likes isn't going to see her that way. I don't know, I may be wrong. But I really like Endo's character, and she's really fun and outgoing. But as for the things that I didn't like, kind of like Digimon Beatbreak, there's really only one. Well, I guess it kind of is two, but I wrote it as one. So I'm generally not a huge fan of romances in anime to start with, especially when they're in high school. Obviously there are exceptions to that because I mentioned Horimiya, I really enjoy that. Even The Dangers in My Heart, really enjoyable show as well. But this one, it's hard for me to get around it because I just don't see what Ishimori sees in Kai. Because it would be different if he was nice to her, but he just constantly bullies her. Like, she tries to say sorry, and he just snaps at her and says, "Don't say you're sorry." It's like, okay, maybe it's tough love, but I just don't like it. It honestly feels borderline abusive, and that may be just overreaction on my part, but I get the idea that he helped her out once and said, "Hey, you should go to this school," and helped her out and so on and so forth, but he just constantly yells at her, and whether it is tough love, I'm not sure, but I just don't like that. It almost feels like he is as bad as the bullies that he tries to protect her from. Again, that might be overreaction, but I just don't like that. Now, it would be different if they had some sort of connection, but he's just honestly not helping the situation much. Although he does help in minor things, and maybe it will be better after episode 3, but it's just, that's the one thing I can't wrap my head around. Overall, it's a fine show. But as for the third topic, and the transition into what I was wanting to talk about earlier, it's Magic Knight Rayearth. So, if you guys, hold on, I need to change this, the picture's a little bit, there we go, that's better. You probably didn't notice it on the screen, but I definitely noticed it. So, early January, I think it was, I posted a video saying, I'm gonna do this big project. It's the 15 days of anime, because Anime Day is on April 15th. Honestly, I might post this on April 15th. I'm not sure. But my idea was to take 15 anime, review each one, and then post them all the way from April 1st all the way through April 15th, with the 15th being the last one. Sounded like a good idea on paper. But the more I'm realizing it, it was a big undertaking for me. I know other people can probably record 15 videos in nothing at all, but it's just hard for me to get motivated on it, especially since a lot of it boiled down to me discussing the same points in every single one. And it may have been because I recorded it in rapid succession that I just kind of lost interest in a way. But the show here, Magic Knight Rayearth, was the one topic that was given to me to discuss on that. So since I'm not doing that, and honestly, the day I'm recording this, my plan is to stream, so I may bring it up there as well. Honestly, it'll probably be better if I bring it up there as well. But yeah, the idea is this was going to be for the 15 days of anime. I decided not to, so I'm discussing it here instead. I don't know if anybody was actually looking forward to the 15 days of anime, but I just figured that this is easier because it's not 15 videos that I have to record and edit, and my head starts swirling around and I start getting a bit in over my head. In hindsight, I shouldn't have done it at all. Rather, I should have recorded the videos early enough that it's not becoming an issue later. But anyway, on to Magic Knight Rayearth. I feel like I'm going to be repeating my points because I already recorded a video discussing it, but basically, in Magic Knight Rayearth, there are these 3 high school girls that go to Tokyo Tower, and they get transported to this magic land called Sephiroth. There, they have to become Magic Knights and save Sephiroth from Zagato. And that's the simple premise of it. But, the thing of it is, after they get everything, get their rune gods and all that stuff, they find out that Zagato might not have been such a bad guy, and it turns out that this was all basically because Princess Emerald fell in love with Zagato, but they can't do that, the whole world's collapsing, all that stuff. I really enjoy that premise. It's really cool. And while I would say that the second half of the show isn't necessarily my favorite, it's still pretty solid. Because the whole premise of the second half is, now there's no pillar because Princess Emerald is dead thanks to the Magic Knights, and there are these different places that are coming to become the new pillar. There's, crap, I should remember these places because they mention them every episode. Whatever. There's 3 places. There's really solid characters. I really enjoy Asuka from whatever place she's from. Although I would say a lot of them are pretty solid. There are just some that I like more than others. But while I'm not a fan of the second half, I do like how the show ties itself together. I like how the second half is directly because of what happened in the first half. Because sometimes in shows, it's just like the first half is done, and now we don't really see consequences from it in the second half, and we're just going about our daily lives. And on that note, the 3 girls are pretty solid characters. Hikaru's a really fun character that doesn't really come off as much stupid as just oblivious, and that's a really fine line to make. Fu is just fine, I'll say. I wouldn't say that she's my favorite, but I like the romance that happens between her and Ferio. It happens organically and makes sense. As for Umi, I will say I wasn't a huge fan of her at first, because she just came off as a spoiled rich girl character, and to be fair, she is still kind of like that, but the fact that everybody else is accepting everything that's going on in this world, and she's the only one overreacting, is really cool. Plus, she has some really cool moments fighting Chizetta in the second half. I would say Umi is probably my favorite character from the 3, but it's a really close margin, and it's really only because of what happens to Hikaru in the second half of the show. Because, transitioning over into my negatives, they decided in the second half to give her a love interest, Zagato's brother, Lantis. Which is crazy to think, because looking at the 2 side by side, Hikaru, 14, I'm pretty sure on a good day. Zagato's brother, Lantis, he looks like he's 25. It's a bit much to kind of suspend your disbelief to understand that something like this makes sense. And that's the biggest thing that I have an issue with in the second half. The romance just kind of comes out of nowhere. Now, granted, it makes sense for Fu because she met Ferio early on, so on and so forth. Hikaru's just kind of comes out of nowhere. And even, what's his name? Ascot falling for Fu, it kind of makes sense, but I don't know. It's just weird because at the start, Ascot looks like he's maybe 4 or 5, but then he gets up to the same height as Umi, and that's a bit much to understand. Although I do love how Ascot says, "I love you, Yumi," and she's just like, "Yeah, I love you too." And I love Hikaru and Fu and Ferio and Precia and just list off everybody. She's just having none of this nonsense. Although it's funny to bring up because I mentioned in the previous entry that I'm not a huge fan of romances, and I feel like it definitely is noticeable here. And the other thing, it was a bit hard for me to really get invested because the art style is a little bit older, but I eventually got over it and really enjoyed the show. I will say the big thing, well, I'm going to be spoiling the end of the show, by the way. So, the big thing is the 2 people that can be pillars are this dude Eagle, which doesn't matter because he's dying, and Hikaru. And it just makes sense for it to be Hikaru, but I'm here wondering, how do they make it work? It seems like a bit of a cop-out that Hikaru becomes the pillar, and then she's just like, okay, I got one wish. I wish that Sephiroth won't be ruled by a pillar anymore, and make things A-okay. It seems like a bit of a cop-out, but I suppose, since they mentioned multiple times, dreams come true, it makes some sense? I don't know. I know that this is one thing that I didn't discuss when I recorded this part the first time. I don't know when it's going to happen, but I think there's going to be some sort of either a rebrand or a new reboot or something like that for Magic Knight Rayearth, because I believe it's going on its 30th anniversary or something. I'm not entirely sure. But whether it's a whole new show with a whole new rebooted cast, or if it's actually just a few OVAs or something, I'm not sure. I didn't really look much into it. But regardless, I'll be curious to watch it if it does come out as a full reboot, just to compare it to this one to see what works better and what doesn't work better. But that is my Let's Talk Anime episode number 75. And if you have any recommendations for Let's Talk Anime, leave them down in the comment section, because I've been holding on to discussing Digimon Beatbreak and Honey Lemon Soda for so long because I didn't have a third topic, but this just kind of fell into my lap and worked out perfectly. But yeah, I have no topics for Let's Talk Anime at the moment, and we'll see how long that lasts. If you enjoyed, hit that like button down below, subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you next time. Momentai.